Hello everyone, today we're going over the Battle of Blair Mountain. The Battle of Blair Mountain was the largest labor uprising in United States history and the largest armed uprising since the American Civil War. The conflict occurred in Logan County, West Virginia, as part of the Coal Wars, a series of early 20th century labor disputes in Appalachia. Up to 100 people were killed and many more arrested. The United Mine Workers saw major declines in membership, but the long-term publicity led to some improvements in working conditions. For 5 days, from late August to early September 1921, some 10,000 armed coal miners confronted 3,000 lawmen and strikebreakers, called the Logan Defenders, who were backed by coal mine operators during the miners' attempt to unionize the southwestern West Virginia coal fields, when tensions rose between workers and mine management. The battle ended after approximately 1 million rounds were fired, and the United States Army, represented by the West Virginia Army National Guard, led by McDowell County native William Eubanks, intervened by presidential order. Background. Since the founding of the United Mine Workers Union in 1890, coal mines in Mingo County, West Virginia, and its surrounds hired only non-union workers, and strictly enforced employment contracts that included union membership as grounds for immediate termination. As miners in the area lived almost exclusively in company towns, termination also meant eviction. In 1920, the UMW's new president, John L. Lewis, sought to finally end the 3-decade resistance to unionization in the area. He was under increased pressure to do so from both miners elsewhere participating in the United Mine Workers coal strike of 1919, and from affected mine operators who were now being undercut by non-union mines in West Virginia. The unionization push included efforts from Mother Jones, who gave fiery speeches at the age of 83, and Frank Keeney, president of the local union district. Over 3,000 Mingo County miners joined the union, and were summarily fired. The coal companies then hired agents of the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency to evict the families of their former employees. On May 19, 1920, a dozen Baldwin Felts detectives, including Lee Felts, arrived in Matawan and connected with Lee's brother Albert Felts. Albert and Lee were the brothers of Thomas Felts, the co-owner and director of the private detective agency. Albert had already been in the area and had tried to bribe Mayor Cable Testerman with $500 to place machine guns on roofs in the town. Testerman refused. That afternoon, Albert and Lee, along with 11 other men, set out to the Stone Mountain Coal Company property. The first family they evicted was a woman and her children. The woman's husband was not at home at the time. They forced them out at gunpoint and threw their belongings in the road under a light but steady rain. The miners who saw it were furious and sent word to town. As the agents walked to the train station to leave town, Police Chief Sid Hatfield and a group of deputized miners confronted them and told them they were under arrest. Albert Felts replied that in fact he had a warrant for Hatfield's arrest. Testerman was alerted and he ran out into the street after a miner shouted that Sid had been arrested. Hatfield backed into the store and Testerman asked to see the warrant. After reviewing it, Mayor Testerman exclaimed, "This is a bogus warrant." With these words, a gunfight erupted, and Chief Hatfield shot the agent Albert Felts. Testerman and Albert and Lee Felts were among the 10 men killed, 3 from town and 7 from the agency. This gunfight became known as the Matawan Massacre, and its symbolic significance was enormous for the miners. The seemingly invincible detective agency, Baldwin Felts, had been beaten. Chief Sid Hatfield became an immediate legend and hero to the Union miners, and a symbol of hope that the oppression of coal operators and their hired guns could be overthrown. Throughout the summer and into the fall of 1920, the Union gained strength in Mingo County, as did the resistance of the coal operators. Sporadic shootouts occurred up and down the Tug River. In late June, state police under the command of Captain Brockus raided the Lick Creek Tent Colony near Williamson. Miners were said to have fired on Brockus and Martin's men from the colony, and in response the state police shot and arrested miners, ripped the canvas tents to shreds, and scattered the mining families' belongings. Both sides were bolstering their arms, and Sid Hatfield continued to fuel the resistance, specifically by converting Testerman's jewelry store into a gun shop. On January 26, 1921, the trial of Hatfield for killing Albert Felts began. It was in the national spotlight and brought much attention to the miners' cause. Hatfield's stature and mythical status grew as the trial proceeded. He posed and talked to reporters, fanning the flames of his own legend. All men were acquitted in the end, but overall the Union was facing significant setbacks. 80% of mines had reopened with imported replacements and ex-strikers who signed yellow dog contracts to return to work. In mid-May 1921, Union miners launched a full-scale assault on non-Union mines. In a short time, the conflict had consumed the entire Tug River Valley. This 3 days battle was finally ended by a flag of truce and the implementation of martial law. From the beginning, the miners perceived the enforcement of martial law as one-sided. Hundreds of miners were arrested. The smallest of infractions could mean imprisonment, while those on the side of, quote, law and order, unquote, were seen as immune. The miners responded with guerrilla tactics and sabotage. In the midst of this tense situation, Hatfield traveled to McDowell County on August 1st, 1921 to stand trial on charges of dynamiting a coal tipple. Along with him traveled a good friend Ed Chambers and their wives. As they walked up the courthouse stairs, unarmed and flanked by their wives, a group of Baldwin Felts agents standing at the top of the stairs opened fire. Hatfield was killed instantly. Chambers was bullet-ridden and rolled to the bottom of the stairs. Despite Sally Chambers' protests, one of the agents ran down the stairs and shot Chambers once more, point blank in the back of the head. Hatfield's and Chambers' bodies were returned to Mattawan, and words of the slaying spread through the mountains. The miners, angry that Hatfield had been murdered and knowing the assassins would escape punishment, began to take up arms and pour out of their mountain settlements. Miners along the Little Coal River were among the first to organize and began actions such as patrolling and guarding the area. Sheriff Don Chafin sent Logan County troopers to the Little Coal River area, where armed miners captured the troopers, disarmed them, and sent them fleeing. On August 7, 1921, the leaders of the United Mine Workers UMW District 17, which encompassed much of southern West Virginia, called a rally on the state capitol in Charleston. These leaders were Frank Keeney and Fred Mooney, who were veterans of previous mine conflicts in the regions. Both were local, well-read, and articulate. Keeney and Mooney met with Governor Ephraim Morgan and presented him with a petition of the miners' demands. When Morgan summarily rejected the demands, the miners became more restless and began to talk of a march on Mingo to free the confined miners, end martial law, and organize the county. But Blair Mountain, Logan County, and Sheriff Chafin stood directly in the way. Battle. At a rally on August 7th, Mary Harris Mother Jones called on the miners not to march into Logan and Mingo counties and set up the Union by force. Accused by some of losing her nerve, she feared a bloodbath in a battle between lightly armed Union forces and the more heavily armed Logan County deputies. Yet, feeling Morgan had lied to them again, armed men began gathering at Lenz Creek Mountain near Marmet in Kanawha County on August 20th. 4 days later, an estimated 13,000 had gathered and began marching towards Logan County. Impatient to get to the fighting, miners near St. Albans in Kanawha County commandeered a Chesapeake and Ohio freight train, renamed by the miners the Blue Steel Special, to meet up with the advanced column of marchers at Danville in Boone County on their way to Bloody Mingo. During this time, Keeney and Mooney fled to Ohio when the fiery Bill Blizzard assumed quasi-leadership of the miners. Meanwhile, the anti-Union Sheriff Chafin had begun to set up defenses on Blair Mountain. He was supported financially by the Logan County Coal Operators Association, creating the nation's largest private armed force of nearly 2,000. The first skirmishes occurred in the morning of August 25th. The bulk of the miners were still 15 miles, 24 kilometers away. The following day, President Warren Harding threatened to send in federal troops and Army Martin MB-1 bombers. After a long meeting in Madison, the seat of Boone County, the miners were convinced to return home, but the struggle was far from over. After spending days assembling his private army, Chafin would not be denied his battle to end Union attempts in organizing Logan County coal mines. Within hours of the Madison decision, rumors abounded that Chafin's men had shot Union sympathizers in the town of Sharples, just north of Blair Mountain, and that families had been caught in crossfire during the skirmishes. Infuriated, the miners turned back towards Blair Mountain, many traveling in other stolen and commandeered trains. By August 29th, battle was fully joined. Chafin's men, though outnumbered, had the advantage of higher positions and better weaponry. Private planes were hired to drop homemade bombs on the miners. A combination of poison gas and explosive bombs left over from World War I were dropped in several locations near the town of Jeffrey, Sharples, and Blair. At least one did not explode and was recovered by the miners. It was used months later to great effect as evidence for the defense during treason and murder trials. On orders from General Billy Mitchell, Army bombers from Maryland were also used for aerial surveillance. One Martin bomber crashed on its return flight, killing the 3 crew members. On August 30th, Morgan appointed Colonel William Eubanks to the West Virginia National Guard to command the government and volunteer forces confronting the miners. Sporadic gun battles continued for a week, with the miners at one time nearly breaking through to the town of Logan and their target destinations, the non-unionized counties to the south, Logan and Mingo. Up to 30 deaths were reported by Chaffin's side and 50 to 100 on the Union miner side, with hundreds more injured or wounded. Chaffin's forces consisted of 90 men from Bluefield, West Virginia, 40 from Huntington, West Virginia, and about 120 from the West Virginia State Police. 3 of Chaffin's forces, 2 volunteers, and a deputy sheriff were killed, and 1 miner was fatally wounded. Federal troops arrived by September 2nd. The miners, many of whom were veterans themselves, were unwilling to fire on U.S. troops. Bill Blizzard passed the word for the miners to start heading home the following day. Miners, feeling jail and confiscation of their guns, found clever ways to hide rifles and handguns in the woods before leaving Logan County. Some were found later, along with many spent and live cartridges, which helped archaeologists reconstruct the course of the fighting. After the battle, 985 miners were indicted for murder, conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to murder, and treason against the state of West Virginia. Though some were acquitted by sympathetic juries, others were imprisoned for years. The last was paroled in 1925. At Blizzard's trial, the unexploded bomb was used as evidence of the government and company's brutality, and he was acquitted. Legacy. In the short term, the battle was an overwhelming victory for coal industry owners and management. UMW membership plummeted from more than 50,000 miners to approximately 10,000 over the next several years. And it was not until 1935, following the Great Depression and the beginning of the New Deal under President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that the UMW fully organized in southern West Virginia. This Union defeat had major implications for the UMWA as a whole. After World War I, as the coal industry began to collapse, Union mining was no longer financially sustainable. Because of the defeat in West Virginia, the Union was undermined in Pennsylvania and Kentucky. By the end of 1925, Illinois was the only remaining unionized state that could compete with them in terms of soft coal production. In the long term, the battle raised awareness of the appalling conditions miners faced in the dangerous West Virginia coal fields. It also led to a change in union tactics and political battles to get the law on labor side by confronting recalcitrant and abusive management. This eventually resulted in a much larger organized labor victory a few years later during the New Deal in 1933. That in turn led to the UMWA helping organize many better-known unions such as the steelworkers during the mid-30s. In the final analysis, management's success was a Pyrrhic victory that helped lead to a much larger and stronger organized labor movement and many other industries and labor union affiliations and umbrella organizations, such as the American Federation of Labor, AFL, and the Congress of Industrial Organizations, the CIO. Future of site. Starting the summer of 2006, a local hobby archaeologist, Kenneth King, led a team of professional archaeologists to further investigate the battlefield. King and the team's initial survey, quote, mapped 15 combat sites and discovered more than 1,000 artifacts, from rifle and shotgun shell casings to coins and batteries, and little signs of disturbance, unquote, to the site, challenging earlier surveys conducted by Arch. In April 2008, Blair Mountain was chosen for the list of protected sites on the National Register of Historic Places, NRHP. The site was accepted and added to the NRHP list on March 30th, 2009, although clerical errors by the West Virginia State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO, failed to notarize all objections. In mid-2010, subsidiaries of the 2 largest coal producers, Arch Coal Inc. and Massey Energy Company, held permits to blast and strip mine huge chunks of the upper slopes and ridge of Blair Mountain, removing much of the mountaintop, National Geographic reported. In October 2012, a federal district judge ruled that a coalition of preservation groups did not have standing to sue to protect the historic site. On August 26, 2014, the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit voted 2-1 to overturn the ruling and return the case. In April 2016, the order to remove the Blair Mountain battlefield from the National Register was overturned by a federal court, and the further decision to add the site back to the register was turned over to the keeper of the National Register. On June 27, 2018, the Keeper's Office decided that the 2009 decision to remove the site from its listings was erroneous and issued a statement confirming that as of that date, the site was again on the National Register. Okay, I think I'm going to call it there. Thank you so much for reading along with me today. I hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something. Please give the channel a subscription, give the video a like if you wouldn't mind. Thank you so very much. Bye-bye.